Today is the 3rd of August. So I'm gonna be fair with myself. I know what causes autism because I'm autistic. So this is theory of ontology. Because I am autistic, I should know what I have, because it's part of my ontology, my nature of being, the nature of being. As I am autistic, I should know what causes autism. And I do know what causes autism. I do have a hint of what causes autism. That is the idea of ontology. So I'm gonna I'm gonna stop talking about it from a research perspective and documents and speak from myself. Oh, hello, you good? Yeah. So and speak from from my head, like what I have, So what I'm gonna do now is introduce the hard problem of consciousness and the easy problem of consciousness. So the easy problem of consciousness is, why are we all aware? Why do we experience something? Okay, why do we all have uh, 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 all experience something? So in my model, you have autistic people, and autistic people are the people that experience all of this autism. Basically, if you have autistic and conscious being, and if you have autism and the easy problem of consciousness, you are. What I'm saying is, you have a framework provided for pre awareness before conscious. Basically, because I was aware before I was conscious. I had a kind of a peripheral awareness. This pre-consciousness allowed me to develop autism or be born with autism. Because I, in my description of my pre-consciousness, pre-awareness, pre-birth awareness, I was in an infinite dimension. I was like, my conscious stuff from 0 perspective to one, could just pop, boom, just like exploded, like it just exploded. So just have a burst, and I was aware of 1 point system because I was there, but I couldn't move until it closed down, collapsed itself, and everything became pitch black darkness. So from my analogy, I experienced consciousness because I understand that this 1 point in the situation allows me to experience 2 point, 3 point dimension, 3 point space, and 4D space. Because I'm living in 4D space, which is time, which I experience to some degree of going back and forth in time, in virtual time, because it happens in a kind of way, being born in this aspect. So what I'm saying is, people with neurotypical people don't have this heightened awareness, because they don't have the heightened awareness that shape their environment, because I'm saying that UK doesn't know what causes autism. But autism is the UK framework. Autism is disability in the UK framework, and in Nigeria we are not sick. So what I'm proposing is a new framework, a different framework to understand it as not a disability. Because I am not disabled. I'm fighting the UK system legally with GitHub.com for such obedience is legal, the legal documentation. I have defined autism in a way, but this has to be defined in such a way, in a rigorous and local way, that serves all of us that are not disabled too, because people have disability too. So some neurotypical have, not all neurotypical people are perfect, Only some of them are born. Some of them are born with disability too, and the neurotypical. So what's to say that autism is a disability if it only becomes a British system? Because their people can't do anything, and that's the same, because that's their right to govern. That's the place to govern. So the neurodivergence for me is autism. ADHD is a superpower. In my framework, it's a superpower. It's not a disability, because one experience allows me to be my most authentic self. Basically the easy problem consciousness. Why we all aware. That is like the baseline for everyone being for some non-solo experiences. But why be aware? Why don't you just perfect computers? Simulation in the simulation. Because if we're to fight a war, why why are we all why aren't we all perfect computers? Like why are we all deterministic perfect computers? Like because evolution has a way of making the similar organism, without being conscious. There's a way of why are we all aware of what we're doing, our actions, our intent, our philosophical based ontology. So epistemology, the conclusion I'm gonna draw from this is it has something to do with the being born and exploring the realities, the world around you, because that's what I did. So I'm defining it as the experience of, having the pre-consciousness, pre-awareness, pre-birth awareness, which, like, pre awareness, they need to develop language or develop senses, because develop new understanding, or basically it's not like new understanding, it's basically a way to map the lobe, like our way of being to what we can learn. It reminds me of the phonetic alphabet. So you have the phonetic alphabet in English, and some words are missing, such as T and P in Chinese. So H and T in Chinese. So H and P, hat, pat, hat, and pat. So Chinese doesn't have the phonetic of the H and P. So H and P are English languages. But, to pronounce that way, you have to develop the phoneme, the phonetic language, phonetic structure. Basically, it's called a phonetic phoneme. Phonemic language doesn't exist in some languages. So it allows us to. So you can't. People that are here trying to serve here have to have awareness of H and P. Cannot have a word because of Chinese, because those sound like the same words to them. Because they don't have the awareness of because the linguistics but if I'm trying to develop one of them. So let me call it. So let's go with autism. So for example, if you have hat, HAT, and you have pat, or you have a pattern, those four words, H, P, are not in the Chinese language, because phonetically they are not constructed in the Chinese language. So basically, it's called a phonetic table, and I'm using it as a model to explain my ideas to you guys. So I hope I'm not wrong about this, because I didn't try to Chinese. I'm not Chinese, but it's okay to help me correct what I'm saying, because H and P are not in the Chinese alphabet. That's my assumption. And so sound fish, because phonetically it's how it's sounding words out. Phonetically it's sounding. So you can sound like PH, you can sound like, which are phonemes that used to pronounce that word. So fat, FAT. The PH is not there in P. It doesn't exist. So I'm using it to develop the idea of how you pronounce a word, but how you allocate symbols on the symbol table. So the symbol tables are phonetic, and it's basically the English alphabet and the Chinese. What is it, Mandarin Chinese I'm talking about? Yeah, Mandarin Chinese. The smallest character set. With one was the smallest character set, not the traditional Chinese. That one I don't understand. So the idea I'm stressing here is that because I was able to act on my decisions before I was born, I was able to explore environment. This is I call my world. I had a world. I can explore a reality before I was born. That's what caused my autism. That's what causes autism, because there is something that can have when it becomes a disability. When it becomes a disability is when something affects you, when you go off, when you can't return to your safe space in whilst pre-birth. For example, if I was conscious, if I claim I was conscious before I was born, so I'm claiming I was conscious before I was born, and I had these experiences before I was in space, before I was born into space, the time for my consciousness, the time for my awareness, had to begin 3 to 6 months. 3 to 6 months. By science, it was 3 to 6 months. 6 months. Into 6 months. Oh, is this 6 weeks or 6 months? I don't know. But you know, the time I had was before I was born in space, because something had to happen in my exploration, in my pre-birth as a sperm to an egg. Something must have happened consciously after the egg has been fertilized. And I must have experienced that thing to give me that disability, to give me said disability. So I'm saying I'm not disabled because I didn't experience anything that could make me, cripple me, while before I was born. So that's the idea. So, I'm explaining that, you know, the way I was born. I had this. If you go to my YouTube channel and search up consciousness, O for Oscar, B for Bravo, I for Indigo. That's O for Oscar, B for Bravo, I for Indigo, N for November, E for Echo, X for X-ray, U for Umbrella, S for Sierra. That where before I was born, I had the ability to explore the real physical world without being in the physical world itself. And that ability was what allowed me to understand certain concepts before I was born too. Because I said I had some experience, but I didn't experience anything negative, anything that would hinder my cognitive development, because I was able to navigate it. So I believe that consciousness, what is consciousness, and autism comes from the consciousness, the development of consciousness, the neurological development of consciousness, and should not be removed from the framework of neurodivergent, because you know, if I'm because I had this experience, I know this experience is certain for me. So in the well-being framework, you know, I also prioritize neurodivergent birth before neurotypical birth. So you know, someone should. If you have a child, it's neurotypical. You have to wait in line. But if you're neurodivergent, because I'm making the framework. I'm deciding what goes here. So neurodivergent people that are born with neurodivergent, autistic, ADHD, Asperger's are prioritized, polar prioritized, because it's gonna make the framework a whole lot better than having it the opposite way around. You know, and because of my experiences too, you know, because I believe there's something, you know. So as soon as I'm born, you know, I am tripolar, I'm not bipolar. So there's certain things I can be in 3 states at once. So you can call me Uche, Ezia, and Obi. You have to address one per day. You have to do, because if I'm saying Uche today, you have to acknowledge I'm Uche. If I say I'm Obi today, you have to acknowledge I'm Obi, because that's the person you're talking to. That's the person. Basically, the interpretation of language is what I use, because I speak differently. I choose who I want to be, you know, in my life. So, you know, I choose the person I want to be to communicate with you authentically, you know. So, and that's basically, if I'm working on project, because I discovered it myself. I do it for medication, or doctors tell me, what do I have now? So that's the idea. So this video is very important to understand. Very important to me, because you know, I am building a framework for neurodivergence, and exploring what kind of experiences in development causes developmental disabilities and delays of the human being. You know, that is the main goal. You know, what causes disability in autistic people? No, I'm not sick. I'm not sick. So I know I'm not sick. So thank you for watching the video, guys.